Welcome to the Day in History for May 4th, and today we're going to talk about Venus. Now today was one of those slow history days. I even had Anna look up for something for Day in History, and there really wasn't much. So I figured, why not talk about planets? I like talking about planets, you like talking about planets, who doesn't like planets? Maybe some people don't like planets. Oh, it's okay. So here we go. Now today's Day in History is the day that the Magellan spacecraft was launched and sent to Venus. Now the Magellan is actually a really important spacecraft because it brought something new to Venus, and I'll tell you about that in just a second. So we are at Venus. It is 67 million miles from the sun. The probe of interest is the Magellan, and we're talking about a technology category. The big idea for today is that Venus is a pretty strange planet. And I know we've talked about Venus before, but I like to talk about it again. Why don't you go ahead and write this down? And here we go. Now, Venus, second planet from the sun, pretty cool. It is covered in a huge, thick layer of clouds. And so for a long time, people thought that maybe it was kind of like Earth. Some of the early science fiction writers wrote stories about entire civilizations that lived on Venus, or how humans could go there and live, and there were oceans and all kinds of stuff. And it turned out to be wrong because Venus is an absolutely horrible, horrible place to be if you're a human. But before we got there and started studying it, we thought that maybe it was just like Earth. It's about the same size, it's pretty close to the same distance. I mean, it's closer to the sun, but it's not like Mercury close, and it's not like Jupiter far away. So we thought, maybe there might be something there. Now, it turned out we were wrong. So, now, the spacecraft Magellan was launched from the Kennedy Space Center. Lots of really cool stuff happens there. One of these days, I'm going to go there, and I'll take my kids. My kids, you guys happy about that? Okay, don't let me forget. Okay, my kids are watching this one. Now, so, these are some of the spacecraft that have gone to Venus. Now, we sent a lot of spacecraft there. When I say we, I'm talking about as humans. Russia sent quite a few. America sent not quite so many, but we wanted to explore this planet. So, let's go to the next slide. Now, we don't have very many good pictures of Venus. This is from the Venera space program that the Russians sent up, and this is one of the best images of the surface of Venus that we have. And part of the reason is that the spacecraft that land on Venus don't last very long because it is such a horrible, horrible environment. But it's pretty crazy to look at this and realize that it's another planet. I mean, we see pictures from Mars all the time. I see them a lot, and you guys have seen them. But Venus, there's not too many pictures from the surface of Venus. If you Google pictures from the surface of Venus, this is what you get. So, pretty interesting. Now, the Magellan Space Probe was designed to do a very specific job. It was designed to map the surface of Venus. And it used the big giant radar dish to do that. And it used a really cool technology. Now, we'll talk about that in a second, but as you can see, this was a pretty big spacecraft. Now, it was launched from the space shuttle, and it was actually the first planetary probe launched from a space shuttle. Before this, all the other probes that went to the planets were launched by themselves on the top of like a Saturn V or a big rocket or something. Now, they were going to launch this earlier, but a few years before there was the Challenger disaster with the space shuttle. And so it delayed the launch just a little bit. But this is an actual picture of the Magellan being launched. Pretty cool. Now, this new technology that it used, well, I guess it wasn't new, but it was something that they were still experimenting with. It was called the SAR system, or synthetic aperture radar. Now, this is a really fancy diagram. But pretty much what it means is that instead of taking a picture with like a camera, it uses the radar dish to send a beam of radiation to the planet, and then it bounces back. And what it does is it measures those radio waves as they come back, and it uses that to create an image. Now, what makes it even more interesting is that as the spacecraft moves, the images move or the radiation bouncing back moves as well. And so they're actually able to get a pretty good picture of what the surface looks like by using this new technology. It's pretty complicated, but just imagine it kind of like echolocation that dolphins use. They send out the sound waves bounce back, and that's how they see it. This is the same thing, they're just using radiation bouncing back to get a picture. Now, why this is important is because Venus's clouds are so thick that the radiation goes right through and comes right back, so you can see it, but other things will get blocked by the clouds. Pretty cool. And so they ended up mapping over 70% of the entire surface of Venus. And it turned out to be pretty cool. Now, a few of the things that they realized was this. There is lava and craters everywhere. A huge part of Venus's surface is covered in lava flows. Now, this is called, what was this picture called? I forgot, crater something. But this is a pretty famous image from the Magellan probe. And as you can see, I think it's called Craterland, because you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 giant craters. Now, I thought it was a pretty cool picture. There's a lot more pictures, but you'll have to look up those on your own. Now, Venus itself is a pretty interesting planet. We've talked about this, but it's relatively the same size as Earth. But that's where the differences, that's where the similarities end, I should say. Now, it has a runaway greenhouse effect, which means the temperature on Venus, 864 degrees. 864 degrees. That is crazy hot. And there's so much cloud and so much atmosphere that it pushes down on you and creates pressure. It would be as if you were swimming down 3,000 feet underwater. Now, just think about when you try to swim underwater at a pool and you go down towards the deep end, and the farther down you get, you can feel that water press on your ears, right? That is pressure. Now imagine going down 3,000 feet. Pretty much what this meant was that when spacecraft landed, the early spacecraft landed on Venus, they got crushed like a pop can because there was so much pressure. Pretty crazy. Now, the runaway greenhouse effect is pretty interesting. So if you look, Earth on one side, you can see it's blue, and what happens is the sunlight comes in, and with the sunlight comes radiation as well, and heat, and it bounces, and some of it can get back out. What happened on Venus is that the light comes in, and it just bounces back and forth under the thick cloud layers. Also, the heat from the planet can't escape as well. And so what happens is it gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter until you end up having a planet that's 900 degrees. Now, there's a lot more research you can do on the greenhouse effect, and if you were to do follow-up, that would be a good follow-up research, is the greenhouse effect. So, now, like I said, it's covered in lava flows. This is a pretty cool image from Venus. What you'll notice is that most of the pictures we see from Venus, other than the Venera space probe, are pictures that look like this, because we can't actually get optical cameras down there, or we haven't sent any back in so long that all we have are these radar type images. Now, Venus is the second brightest object in the night sky after the moon. If you see something super, super bright, it's probably Venus. Might be Jupiter, but probably Venus. Now, what's really cool is that its day lasts 243 Earth days. So the sun will rise and set every 243 days. Now that's pretty crazy, and it happens because Venus actually rotates backwards really, really slowly. So another interesting fact about Venus. Now, the atmosphere of Venus is pretty cool as well. This is a cool little experiment you can do. Now, you imagine each element in the atmosphere as like a piece of candy, right? So if you look at Venus, it's covered in CO2 with a little bit of nitrogen, a tiny bit of argon, and no oxygen. If you look at the Earth The Earth is filled with red for nitrogen and oxygen and a few other elements. And if you look at Mars, Mars also is filled with CO2, a little bit of nitrogen, a tiny bit of oxygen. So as you can see, if you tried to breathe on Venus or Mars, our lungs, our bodies would not work, okay? The atmosphere we need is Earth. So this is a really cool experiment. Now, Venus is a pretty cool planet. It's a really hot planet. It's a really strange planet. And to be honest, I would love to see a new space probe go there that has some really high definition cameras so we can see what's happening on the surface. I think that would be fantastic. Maybe that can be your job. Thanks, guys. See ya.